and Don Carson eventually retired, and you had Dennis Condrey, who was in search for a tag team partner. And all of a sudden, he finds a guy by the name of Randy Rose. And eventually, those two become Southern Tag Team Champions. Amazingly, they become champions, they jail, but they don't call themselves the Midnight Express just yet. Enter Norvell Austin, who was teaming with a guy by many of you may know from his days in WCW, Brad Armstrong, of the famous Armstrong family. And they had a feud with Condrey and Rose. And before you know it, that feud ends by a cheap shot by Norvell Austin. He turns on his partner, Brad Armstrong, and all of a sudden, he joins Condrey and Rose to form the first Midnight Express. Now, this tag team combination didn't last a long time. Maybe a plethora of months at best. But from all reports that I've seen, I haven't seen a lot of footage and stuff from this trio, which I really would. If any of you actually have footage on this, I would definitely like to see it, because I haven't found it on YouTube or anywhere else of this trio in Southeastern Championship Wrestling. But from reading Jim Cornette's excellent scrapbook, when he discusses the Midnight Express in great detail, definitely think you should check that out on www.jimcornettecollectibles.com, where you can buy that scrapbook for a mere $25. It's worth every penny of it. I don't have it with me right now, but it's definitely something you really have to look at. I'll give you guys the link towards the end of the show in the credits. But this group lasts for a pretty significant time, not really a long time, until you fast forward all the way on. It's around the 1982, 1983 range. And eventually, Condrey and Rose and Norvell Austin, they all split up. And you have Condrey now working in Mid-South, where Bill Watts was the promoter. And you have a young cat by the name of Bobby Eaton, who had really been busting his ass from the late 70s all the way on at a very young age. I think he was like in his teens when he first started. And he was really doing well as a singles wrestler, but he could never get at the top of the card. He could never get higher. So eventually, those two, Condrey and Bobby Eaton, they've wrestled each other before, so they already have an understanding and a chemistry going. And before you knew it, this is what happened. Those two became a tag team. And Bill Watts brought in a young, I wouldn't say enormously green, but he was very young to the business in terms of working in it, Jim Cornette. And all of a sudden, you have just a magic happen before your eyes. Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey and Jim Cornette, formed the second version of the Midnight Express. And this Midnight Express just was, in my opinion, probably 10 times as better than the original. But that's to be expected if you're going to keep that name. And keep in mind, they're doing it in a different territory, so those fans in the Mid-South probably never even heard of the name, so it's really fresh to them. But this tag team just is on fire. And because Eaton and Condrey had already had familiarity in terms of their different styles of singles wrestlers, they were able to really gel as a tag team, because they knew each other's idiosyncrasies, and they knew each other's motions inside the ring, which is paramount in tag team wrestling. It's something you just don't see today, because guys just simply don't gel. They don't have chemistry. Even though they face each other a lot, they don't have the chemistry. The last two teams that I can remember, 3 teams I should say, recently that I can remember that are like that within the last 5 years are Beer Money, Jerry Show, and The Miz and John Morrison. Those are the only teams that I can personally think of in the last several years that had that kind of chemistry. But enough of rambling on right there. In Mid-South, the Midnight Express, Condrey, Bobby Eaton, beautiful Bobby Eaton, Loverboy Dennis Condrey, and Jim Cornette, they all basically have a huge feud with several of the prominent baby faces that we would really grow to know in professional wrestling. And off the top of my head, I can say the Rock and Roll Express. This is really where the Rock and Roll Express got its really first start in the business, against the Midnight Express, the first really big angle that they'd ever had. And this feud just tore up all sorts of records. in the Mid-South area around 1984. It was, and, you know, just looking back at those matches today, looking at the promos, they're so fresh. They still could really be popular today if given the opportunity. And I think a lot of wrestling fans would really be excited about seeing a lot of that good stuff. And you know, if you haven't seen it yet, I definitely recommend that you do see it, because just great stuff. But, you know, Jim Cornette basically his whole gig was, I'm a rich mama's boy from Kentucky, and to make my mama proud, to really make her proud, you know, I play tennis, and I'm really good socially. And you know what? I want to make my mama proud on something else. I'm a big wrestling fan, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy me a tag team. I'm going to put that tag team together, and they're going to win me the tag team championships. They're going to win me the Mid-South titles. They're going to win all the titles around the world if given the opportunity. And that's not the easiest concept to get around, and not the easiest concept to get over in wrestling. But the Midnight Express did that. And it wasn't just Jim Cornette talking, because he did most of the talking, and Condrey would usually go in, but Bobby Eaton never spoke that much. He would do his talking in the ring. He was really the workhorse, in my opinion, of all of the versions he was a part of in the Midnight Express. I think Bobby Eaton was just fantastic. But yeah, they had just a huge angle with the Rock and Roll Express in Memphis. Got so many fans out. I'm not Memphis, but in Mid-South. Got so many people out there looking at it, and it was just, you know, just a really good time to be a wrestling fan back then. Sometimes I wonder how it would have been to go to all of these shows, go to 2 shows a week around the same towns, and see these promotions put on the same angle and have the same result. I just think that's incredible. I wish it was like that again today. But to make a long story short, you know, the Midnight Express eventually left Mid-South, and they go to WCCW. Now, for many of you who don't know WCCW, which I would think was really surprising considering the last several years, that's World Class Championship Wrestling. What World Class Championship Wrestling had was a huge advantage over pretty much all the other promotions except for Jim Crockett Promotions, in the fact that they had international syndication. And that's really big, people. If you don't know that, that's really huge back then, when cable really wasn't as big as it is and what it turned out to be in the late 80s and early 90s, and even today where it's all digital cable, which is just huge. You lived and you died by your TV, and TV was syndicated. Now keep in mind, international syndication. And the syndicated, and just regional syndication in Dallas-Fort Worth area, and also picking up in San Antonio and Oklahoma and all these areas around the country, is really amazing. And that's what World Class Championship Wrestling had. So in 1985, the Midnight Express takes its act, and they go to WCCW. Now their time there was extremely short-lived. I think they were only there for like 6 months or so. And they did have one significant angle. They had that angle with the Fantastics, who I think is probably, not probably, I think they're the most underrated tag team of all time. I'm talking about Tommy Rogers and, excuse me, I'm talking about Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton. 2 guys from the City of Angels, and they basically took the place of the Rock and Roll Express in WCCW. And they beat the heck out of Midnight Express, and the Midnight Express beat the heck out of them. Just, the angle was fantastic for as short as it was. You know, it's hard to really explain it in words. You really have to see it. But a lot of the tricks and stuff that they did in Mid-South with the Rock and Roll Express, they just did the same tricks with the Fantastics. And the Fantastics went over huge as a result. But eventually, all good things really do come to the end. But in this case, it was a really short end. And you had the Midnight Express leave there and get their first big national break. And I'm going to talk about that big break coming up next on the Paradigm, but I want you to first check out this pretty cool video about the Midnight Express, and judge for yourself. Peace.